Success. I used to struggle with spelling this word success because I didn't understand that CE rule when I was 8. And now I'm 18 and I can spell the word just fine. I just struggle with understanding the word. Webster Dictionary defines success as a fact of getting or achieving wealth, respect, or fame. But Hebrews defines success as to cause a person to be wise, understanding, or prosperous. We probably all define success a little different in our minds and throughout our own lives. I have learned so far that success is not something that is easily obtained, and it isn't something we are born with. I have also learned that God has defined success the right way, because anyone that I have met that is successful in my mind is understanding, wise, and comfortable with themselves, and there's no way they grew successful in one day or without the Lord's help. When I first entered Perry Baptist Youth Group, I was a mess, mostly because I was in middle school and I had 1,000 emotions hitting me all at once, but also because I had never been to church, so honestly, I was a little terrified to be surrounded by random kids that grew up together in this church. The Davis family invited me my first time, and my mom forced me to go my second time, and I gladly went all the other times. This group was so welcoming and understanding, it grew into being one of those impactful, irreplaceable groups in my life. And the people that were once random kids grew into being my best friends. PBY also gave me some unforgettable memories and strengths that I could utilize all throughout my life. My first trip with this group was our question mark trip. I had to learn pretty quickly that 1, Kyle doesn't answer any questions that start with who, what, when, where, or how. And 2, trust was something that I needed to work on. My first trip, I also was exposed to the amazing and breathtaking ways of God. Kyle took us to the wall farm, and that night we drove out to look at the stars. If I had to pinpoint a start to my faith, it would be this first trip in that moment. We were all laying in the back of the truck and staring at a sky full of bright specks, and I was thinking how amazing it is that God created this and that I got to experience the wonders of the night sky because of him. Also on that trip, I fasted for the first time. I read the Bible for the first time with no distractions except the wind and insects. I learned that nature was a great place to meditate with the Lord and have no distractions, and that the extraordinary ways of nature will always be where I see God the most. My next trip was Alaska, which will forever be my favorite state. It reinforced my amazement of nature, but also gave me a new understanding of people. Before Alaska, the closest I've gotten to a glacier was watching National Geographic and science class. While in Alaska, we got to land on an actual glacier, a large sheet of ice that no human had touched in at least 50 years. The snow was untouched except by God. This showed me the true vastness of the Lord's work. We also helped tear down a playground for Alaska Family and Children Organization and built a gazebo. We learned how to worship through drum circle and a sweat lodge. That time of worshiping was another no distraction time. I was sweating so much, but I wasn't focused on that. I was focused on understanding what God had planned for me and what he would give me to prepare. We met a worker at Alaska Family and Children who gave us small, shiny rocks for all our help. I didn't think much of what we did because it was small. Some of us dug up weeds and built flower boxes, but it wasn't like we did something that no one else could have done. But in her view, we had done something amazing. This would be a common recurring theme throughout all our trips I've been on. Me thinking our work doesn't mean much, when in actuality, it means the world to the people we help. Alaska and a lot of other trips taught me that a small act of showing God's love can mean so much to someone, especially to someone who is in dire need of the Lord. Last year, the youth went through a poverty simulation where we lived like homeless people for 24 hours during our DC trip. This simulation was one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life. That night was long, cold, and plain uncomfortable, and we had the gift of being sheltered while most homeless people don't. The next day, we had tasks to accomplish, and we had to find our way to Chinatown to meet the rest of the group. My group was a little lost, like all the groups, but we would ask people for directions, and most were willing to help us out. At first, I was like, this is so nice, and someone would help out anyone. But then I realized that we for sure didn't look like homeless people. We just looked like tourists. We finally made it to Chinatown, and my group went to church at a very formal church where everyone was dressed up. I felt completely out of place and embarrassed, but no one commented, so we all stayed mostly quiet in the back until they called us out and asked us to introduce ourselves. That church was very welcoming, and many of them came up to us and introduced themselves too. I can't help but think they did this because it was a church and not because that's what they would do normally to people on the streets. The poverty simulation taught me not to judge someone by their clothes or looks, because if someone did that to us that day, we would probably still be trying to find our way in Chinatown. The poverty simulation leader, Paget, also taught us that people that are homeless are the ones that really need our smiles and help. This lesson has stuck with me. I always have to have a smile to offer, and I learned not to be afraid of someone who is different than me. James 2, verse 13 says, "Mercy triumphs over judgment." This group and living through Christ has taught me to be merciful, understanding, and judgment-free. God has also shown me in times when I'm in need, I can depend on him for my strength and to protect me. I had no idea what was in store for me when I joined this group. I didn't even know about the power of Christ, but looking back at my journey during my teenage years, I clearly see God doing his work. He has shaped me into an understanding, courageous, trustworthy, merciful young woman. God has granted me the gift of grace, and even after youth group, I will try to spread grace wherever I go. He's also blessed me with amazing friend group that I can turn it to with anything and amazing role models. Right now in my life, as I have one more week of high school, I'm trying to be successful, not in the dictionary view or in society's view, but in God's view. I will always strive to attain success in this way.
Take a moment and think of one of your personality traits. Is that trait something you've always had? Do you sometimes find it difficult to be that trait? Personality traits are these ideas that generally provide an accurate description of who a person is. Most people will describe me as someone who is outgoing, someone who loves meeting new people, as someone who introduces herself first and isn't afraid to take a risk. The truth is, I'm afraid of meeting new people. I'm afraid of that moment after you introduce yourself because one of two things usually happens. We could start a conversation right away, or we could be silent after learning each other's names, which usually follows with one person awkwardly leaving. Point is, we all have something we're terrified of. And my time in the youth group has forced me to take whatever it is that makes me uncomfortable and do it over and over again, because each time I realize it really wasn't that bad. For example, when we went to Alaska, we were going to be sharing a project with another youth group. And I remember being terrified of having to actually include another group in what we do. Fast forward 4 years, and we went on a trip to Houston where we shared a church with 250 other people, and the only thing that got on my nerves was the inability to keep the shower rooms clean. While each trip has had its specific impact, they all seem to add a building block to what I would consider one of the biggest lessons I've learned during my time in the youth group. And that is to step outside my comfort zone and take a risk. You see, taking risks does not just require courage. It requires trust, and I feel like the only thing this group has ever required of me is trust. It's what we're built on. We trust that we have each other's backs. We trust that we'll work as hard as we can to complete a project. And we trust the leaders enough to participate in activities that put us outside our comfort zones. The first trip I was on, like Sydney, was a Kansas City trip. And Kyle basically gave us a packing list and refused to tell us what we were doing until we were doing it. At this time of the trip, I'd been in the youth group for a year, and needless to say, I had my doubts. I wasn't exactly excited when Kyle announced that we would be fasting for 24 hours. However, that trip turned out to be a very important milestone in my spiritual life. This was the second time I had fasted in my entire life. The first time I had tried to fast, I was about 10 years old. We were in our hometown for Christmas, and my aunt was making all the kids she deemed prepared participate in the fast. It was from 6 a.m. to noon, and I remember being so hungry that all I could do was sleep. When I got up at noon expecting to eat, my aunt proceeded to gather us all in the living room and then went ahead to pray for 30 minutes. But this time, But this time, not only did I complete the 24-hour fast, I did it while Miss Becky baked bread, and I only took a 2-hour nap. On my second trip, we were in Alaska, and we did something similar to a nature walk. We were riding bikes along this trail that had a pond next to it and all these houses on the side. It was really pretty. But fun fact, before this experience, I had never ridden a bike. I didn't know how to. I had never tried to learn it, but I learned how to ride a bike that day. I don't remember quite why I decided to get on a bike. I'm assuming Kyle probably convinced me to. But for the duration of that 14-mile ride, Nancy and Kyle stayed with me the entire time, encouraging me to keep going, and at the end of that 14 miles, I was able to say I knew how to ride a bike. Now, this might seem like it has everything to do with being encouraged, but nothing to do with trust. But I'm someone who tends to refrain from doing anything that might cause me harm. I'm very calculated when I do things like riding a bike for the first time in a public space next to a pond that I could fall into. But this time, I trusted Kyle and Nancy enough to get on a bike without knowing how to ride one, and they trusted me enough to let me try, knowing that I might stop in the middle and decide that I wasn't going to do it anymore. So you see, a lot of trust happened that day, and I'm personally very glad it did, because not only can I now ride a bike, I can also take risks knowing that whatever happens, this group will always be there to support me. This group is one that I talk about all the time. I don't think any of my classmates and teachers are unaware of the fact that I'm a part of this group. And the reason I talk about it so much is because of the unending love and support. Regardless of what I end up doing, I know that they'll always cheer me on. And it takes a supportive church to create such an amazing youth group. So from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you for investing in us, for believing in us, for praying for us, and most importantly, for supporting us.
These verses have a very strong meaning in our group. Be strong and courageous. God is with you wherever you go was sung from here to Michigan, literally. We had this verse during our VBS one summer, and it has stayed with us ever since. This week, I learned that the song that I love so much was not the whole verse and not all of what the seniors picked to cover this Sunday. In verse 7, there's talk of success. In our world today, success is usually measured in wealth and persistence. Personally, I feel like success is more based on happiness. If one has no money but is happy with their life, why isn't that successful? If one has all the money in the world but can't seem to find something that makes them happy, then what's the point? Everyone has their own definition of success. While I think it means how happy I am, someone else might believe it's how far they get in their career, or maybe success to them is to put food on the table and provide for their family. For whatever you think success is how you will live your life to achieve it. In the Bible, God tells Joshua that if he meditates the law and follows directions exactly, then he will have success. Well, I'd love to have a set of directions to follow exactly that'll lead me to be prosperous and successful. What I didn't realize was that I already had that. The 10 Commandments were Joshua's guide, and they're our guide too. God told Joshua to study them day and night so that he would act accordingly. I think this is a lesson for all of us. I know if I studied the commandments day and night, it would sure show in my actions. I think that's what God wants. He wants us to spread his word through our actions rather than our words. In the youth group, that's exactly what we do. We travel the country helping those in need and spreading God's love. God has a plan for Joshua, and he has a plan for all of us. But Joshua still had a big decision to make. Now, like Joshua, the seniors have a big decision to make in our lives as well. I don't know about you, but when I have a hard decision to make, I try to wait as long as possible to make it. I'm sure my mom can agree that my family and friends around me were getting a little squirmish about my decision for college next year. Like all my life-changing decisions, it was hard, and it was hard to pick knowing I wouldn't have my friends close by to hang out with. This youth group is important to me, and leaving it will be one of the hardest things I've ever done. They have guided me through the years. God works through them to show us all the way. We work through his name and show others around the world our love for him. This group has given me some of the best experiences of my life. I would have never imagined myself going through more than 32 states to help those in need. When people ask me about my youth group, I tell them about our trips and how wonderful this group is, and they are surprised about how far we go. It is amazing to share about all of our unique experiences as a group, because not many youth groups get to go to Alaska or Nicaragua, let alone 2 trips in 1 year. When people think of mission trips, they think of boring, churchy stuff. While our trips are filled with God's love and we devote time to him every day, we have so much fun doing it. There is rarely anything about our trips that are boring, not because Kyle planned them so well, but because our group, but because in our group we entertain and help each other. We show God's love rather than preach, and I think that's what's so special about our group. Through God's love, this youth group has taught me many things, including patience, flexibility, and trust. Though I have not mastered patience, and some may think I have none, I have gotten better. On these wonderful trips, there are many times we don't know what we're doing. We wake up in the morning and ask Kyle, and he says, "You'll find out when we get there." I like plans, and I like to know the plan, but sometimes not knowing is better just in case they are changed. Sometimes we do know the plan and always have to be ready to change everything in a split second. There are many things we do that I am not sure about. Climbing Flat Top Mountain was not necessarily something I would call fun, but once Kyle got us up to the top, it was totally worth it. I have learned to just trust Kyle because I know everything will turn out fine, even if it's not the way I want it. In Washington, D.C., during our poverty simulation, I was in a group with Kyle thinking that would be great because he kind of knows where we're going. But then he decided he was going to be mute. I had to be flexible and patient as we tried to make our way to Chinatown in a city none of us had ever been to before. Trust, patience, and flexibility are all great traits that I am so glad I learned with this group. I know next year I will miss them all like crazy, but I know God has prepared me for this moment, just like God prepared Joshua. Like the seniors before me, I leave with a heavy heart in hopes to find another group like this, but I know the incoming seniors for next year will lead the younger youth just as well or better than we did this year. Thank you.
I have been dreading this day since I was in 7th grade. Not because, I just start off with a laugh, that's perfect. Not because I don't like giving speeches, because as many of you know, I like doing this quite a bit. But because I know that once I finish this, I'm just going to be one step closer to walking across the graduation stage and starting a whole new chapter of my life. A chapter that I am truly terrified to write. This group has been everything to me these last 6 years, and even before that, and I have no idea what I'm going to do without it. In order to fully delve into the be strong and courageous aspect of my sermon, I want to tell you a little story of my first trip. Bayboro, North Carolina, spring break of 2012. I was an annoying, maybe not so little 7th grader who was about to be away from his parents for the first substantial length of time in his life, other than spending a week with his grandparents in Ohio. I was terrified. I wasn't scared to be with the youth group. I loved everyone here, and I felt very safe and secure, but I was scared of the people we would meet. Our first night there, an older couple came and introduced themselves to some of us. Their names were Neil and Vivian, and they were from Charlotte, North Carolina. Over the next few days, I saw quite a bit of Neil and Vivian, but on our last work day, they took Dean Humphrey and I to a demolition site to pick up the debris of a wrecking ball that had torn down the building earlier that morning, and they bought us ices at a gas station afterwards. I wish I could have told them this, and I hope that someday I get the chance, but Neil and Vivian are the two people who have had the single biggest impact on my life of anyone I've ever met. Whether they knew it or not, they helped a scared little 7th grader, not so little 7th grader, open up and meet new people and showed him God's love through their own love, their kindness, their generosity, and their laughter. This group has not only provided me with experience I otherwise wouldn't have had, but they've supported me so much. As an actor, you always hope that you're going to have a good crowd to feed off of every night, but I knew when the nights the youth were coming, I had nothing to worry about. They have supported me through everything, thick and thin, good and bad, playing a man and a woman a couple of times. And they have taken great pride in doing so, and that has meant the world to me. Kyle has told us a group like this doesn't come along very often, and he is so right. The youth get along so well for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest is the fact that we constantly lift each other up and give one another the courage to face the challenges we encounter on a day-to-day basis. Next year will mark a lot of firsts for all the seniors. First time at college, first time being adults, first time having to make decisions all by ourselves. But I know that God will always be with me, as will the countless memories I've made with these amazing people. This is a little cliche, but I have to thank some people here. I want to thank the youth, first and foremost, current and past, for shaping me into the person I am today. You all have the biggest hearts of anyone I know and are going to do extraordinary things for this world. Please don't take this group for granted. I could preach this until I'm blue in the face. Don't take this group for granted. You're going to be standing here before you know it. To all the leaders, thank you for taking the time to make me feel so loved and special and appreciated every Sunday and every day on trips. You all are my second sets of parents, or my first, Mom. And you have treated me as your own son, and I am beyond grateful for that. And lastly, Kyle. Kyle is the reason that this group is what it is. Sure, we put in hard work and labor on all of these trips and generally have a smile while doing it, but what people seldom see is Kyle behind the scenes. He's the one who has made this group the tight-knit family you see today. He loves each and every one of us for our flaws, our quirks, our good days, our bad days, and for just being who we are. He asks us each and every trip to write about where we see God. Well, Kyle, I think I speak for this entire church when I say we see God in you and everything you do. Yes. Yeah. I cannot thank you enough for all of the love, support, hugs, tears, laughs, jokes, movies, food, singing in the car, shows, and sports through the years. We are all about to embark on the biggest journey of our lives. And thanks to you, we are all prepared to face the world, whether we realize it or not. This group has taught us that God is with us no matter what. Through and through, time and time again, He is the constant when everything is rather unconstant in this world. That gives me strength. I know I can go out and conquer it all. I have an amazing support group here and always will. They've given me all the courage I need to go chase my dreams, yet never let go of the things that matter most to me. They have enabled me to be the best person I can be, week after week, month after month, year after year. They've helped me find my corner of the sky.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, Kyle started talking to us about Youth Sunday, and we picked a verse, Joshua 1, verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I suddenly got very anxious and stressed because it's a lot of pressure to write a sermon and tie in a Bible verse and talk about how that's changed your life. At least for me it was. But I knew this would happen at some point. I knew my time with youth would end. I knew I would have to write a sermon and read it in front of everyone. I knew high school would come to an end, but it came a lot sooner than I thought. If I could go back in time, I would start my youth group experience over. I did lots of negative thinking and dealt with anxiety and depression the whole time in this group, and it affected a lot of my experiences negatively. And I wish it didn't, but with the help from this group, from God, and from my mom, I was able to get through some of really tough times. Oh my gosh, okay. The person I am today would be totally different had I not been part of the youth group. I wouldn't be able to say I've spent my spring break and summer break helping those in need. I wouldn't be able to say I have a friend in Michigan named Jackson who's the coolest kid I've ever met. I wouldn't be able to say I've been through half the United States and then some. I would not be as strong as I am today without this group. One recent moment that I think I will remember forever took place in Houston. It was March 14th, also known as Pie Day, and Kyle allowed the seniors to buy pie for everyone. And I remember standing back a little and while the others were deciding on a pie, and I was just thinking, wow, these people are amazing. I love them all very much. Since I've grown so close with the seniors, I've always been scared to leave and be without them because They're the most loving, kind-hearted people I've ever met, as well as some of the most brutally honest people I've met. We've gotten really close over the years. We keep each other updated on our lives, so it's weird to see this chapter of our lives come to an end. I know we will all still be friends after this because they've reassured me multiple times, but nevertheless, I'm going to feel strange when I don't see them at least once a week like I have for the past 6 years, except for Zach, because I'll probably see him a lot. For those of you that don't know, we're going to the same college. So I'd like to say thank you. Thank you, youth group, for always being there for me and loving who I am. Thank you, youth leaders, for being who you are and loving each and every one of us. Thank you, Prairie Baptist, for helping us and loving us along the way. Thank you, Mom, for always being there for me and for teaching me how to be a strong, independent woman. And thank you, God, for leading my family and I to this church and blessing me to be part of this youth group. But most importantly, thank you for allowing me to be strong, to be courageous, to not be afraid, and for being with me wherever I go. Seniors, I love you a lot, and I know you're all going to do amazing things. I'm so glad I got to experience this with all of you.
When I was younger, David and Goliath was one of my favorite stories of the Bible. Honestly, looking back, this is probably because it was one of the few stories I knew super well because of how shy I was. I was too scared to go to Sunday school that often, so I used what knowledge I had. In terms of the verse we're following today from Joshua, I guess I gotta give myself some credit for knowing things, because the other day I found my old pink Precious Moments Bible, saw that I had circled Joshua in the table of contents and wrote "favor right" next to it because I did not spell it right, but that's besides the point. Going back to David and Goliath, I was always so enthralled with the idea of the little guy who, against all odds, defeated the giant Goliath. I think I liked this idea because of how little I felt and truly how little I actually was. I was in 7th grade, so. It's crazy what 6 years in this youth group can do to you. I believe when you break down the story, you have your typical protagonist against a challenge, against a fear, against life's troubles. I needed to be David in my life, and I needed to pick up the slingshot and rock and just take a chance against my fears. I just didn't know how. I was scared of everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I was looking back at pictures from 7th grade. I wasn't even smiling all the way. I was afraid to smile. Anyways, I walked into this youth group, this church, a terribly quiet and shy girl who didn't have an idea to maneuver the strange way the group works. The kids were loud, the actions were crazy, and the youth pastor was a little nuts. I remember walking on the bus on my first mission trip, sitting next to my brother, much to his happiness, and waving out to the window to my parents thinking, what the heck did I just get myself into? Sometimes I still enter the bus with that same thought, just not the same feeling. See, this group taught me how to face my fears and be courageous by tossing me in ridiculous situations I would never put myself in, or at least I wouldn't have in 7th grade. The idea of talking to people I didn't know was vomit-inducing. The idea of climbing a mountain in Alaska and almost dying. Side note, sorry, Sydney, for yelling at you for actually being upset that I almost fell off the mountain. I wouldn't have thought about walking kids around DC for a whole day. I mean, gosh, that is absolutely terrifying. I wouldn't have thought of almost everything we have done in youth. It's amazingly terrifying. You know, being scared isn't always that bad. It means it's different. Things are changing and you are growing. And fear showed me that there are things to lie ahead. Fear leads to courage, and that courage leads me to amazing things, helping people across the country. It led me to North Carolina, a mountain in Alaska, the Grand Canyon, the Lincoln Memorial, Times Square, and so many places in between to help people and experience life. All these Goliaths, per se, and I picked up that slingshot. But I had help. I had people hand it to me. So we're going to go a little award ceremony and thank some people. Kyle, thank you for forcing me to play the guitar on Youth Sunday about 5 years ago, because now I play to more people than just my bedroom walls, and I actually know how to play bass guitar because my dad gave me 4 days to learn how to play bass guitar as they were short a musician. Becky, Dina, and Nancy, thank you for being a mother to all of us when we needed it, when we were so far away from our own, and reminding us to drink water so we wouldn't pass out on a ladder. The seniors, Emma, I love you, buddy. Thanks for taking me to concerts and pushing me out of my comfort zone in crowds of people, because that was some radical music. Sydney, thanks for not climbing a mountain the day after I almost died so I wouldn't be alone in the gift shop. Zach, thanks for getting the whole cast at Shawnee Mission South to sing me happy birthday, because I learned how to deal with humility in embarrassing situations. Aloma, thank you for being calm and collected whenever I'm not, because you teach me patience and intellect. And Rachel, thanks for braiding my hair all these years, even after 5 days of not washing it. That teaches me perseverance and a love for friendship often unheard of. Anyways, back to my point. This group has taught me what I never really learned from David and Goliath all those years back, to be strong and courageous, for God is with you wherever you go. It only took singing this a million times in Camp Discovery for me to think, maybe there's a deeper meaning to this. I realize that there are Goliaths everywhere. Whether it's fear or heartbreak, sickness or hardships, these so-called giants face us every day, some little, some small. But we all must learn to pick up that slingshot every once in a while and take a chance, embrace the David within us. Because he is in all of us, because God is with us. This youth group helped me face those Goliaths. Without PBY, I wouldn't be good at guitar, I wouldn't know bass guitar, and I wouldn't be the musician I am today. I wouldn't have realized my passion for helping people, which brought me around the country, from painting homes in New Orleans to walking around memorials with a young girl as she held my hand and talked to me like she had known me forever. I wouldn't have these amazing people in my life who support me in all my endeavors, even if I may be wrong in them. I wouldn't have the courage to pursue art because I would have been too scared to show people sketches on the margins of my homework that would eventually turn into paintings or even a mural. It's insane. I wouldn't be going to Chicago for college because that's terrifying. Talk about a real-life Goliath. My entire self, future, and past would be different, and I wouldn't change a thing about the last 6 years with PBY, except maybe for embracing it earlier on and making every moment last. So with these final words to PBY and Prairie Baptist, I ask you to face your Goliaths. I ask you to be the David that God knows you are. Pick up the slingshot and take a chance. Life is scary, but remember, be strong and courageous. God is with you wherever you go.